realfaith.org.au.
In my high school years, I had a teacher who was my trombone teacher, and we'd go and sit in my trombone lesson and probably spend most of the time just letting me debrief on life. She was there to teach me trombone, but to have that moment of being able to have a safe person who I can just share what's happening in my world made all the difference. And that's what Kids Hope is all about.
Welcome to Real Faith. Conversations about the impact faith has on our lives and the challenges we go through, helping us today and giving us hope for tomorrow. That's real people, real life, and real faith with Eric Scatterbo.
Well, our guest today is once again Simon Warrick, who's joining me in our Melbourne studios and is sharing his life journey with us. As we heard last time, when Simon was a child, he was given plenty of reasons to hold on to grudges and to not be forgiving. His father had left the family for another woman, and later he felt mistreated by his stepfather. But, as we'll hear today, the Lord has helped him to heal and forgive. Also, Simon is now in a ministry where he can use all the painful experiences from his past to help him better minister to others. We'll pick up the story as Simon's father has passed away, and then things took a turn for the worse.
I say it with hindsight, and it almost feels like a crazy movie that just keeps rolling and keeps rolling, but that was my life.
Yeah, but it even got worse than that.
It did. So you now step forward to, I was in year 7, year 8, something like that, about 13 years old, and Mum had been single ever since Dad left, and a man from church came in and swept her off her feet, and they got married pretty quickly, and the unfortunate thing was he'd managed to keep a facade up until they got married, and then afterwards we got to see the real him. And my experience of him, he comes from, I guess he parented very differently to what I was used to, and there was a lot of yelling. There wasn't a lot of opportunity to have a conversation. I felt like I was a bit of an annoying appendage to my mum, like he wanted mum, but I was there as well. And it just was really messy. So through my teenage years, I would find myself locking myself in the room just because I just wanted to be by myself, didn't want to be near him. There was one time I remember he got a phone call from a friend back in the olden days where, the house phone would ring and it was attached to the wall. And his friend was in Geelong or something, and so that was long distance back in the day. And I told him about it, and he went, yeah, okay, no worries. He was listening to the cricket or something. And I came back 5-10 minutes later, and I'm like, you realise your friend's still on hold? And he said, shut up, yelled at the top of his voice at me. And I went, that's it. So I bolted to my room, locked the door, and he tried to knock on the door and tried to apologise because he knew he'd done the wrong thing. I didn't want to hear of it. So then when Mum got home, she realised something was wrong with me, went and asked him what was wrong. Next thing, he bowls into my room, starts yelling at me, I apologised. And it just kept going and going and going. So I tried to push past him, and he grabbed me and just sort of threw me up against a wall. And Mum screamed at him. He let me go. I disappeared, left the house, jumped on my bike, went to my sister's house. And so that was pretty traumatic. I'm trying to go through high school at this time. VCE here in Australia is 2 years. So year 11 and year 12 in Victoria. I was halfway through year 12, and I remember saying to Mum, I just can't do this anymore. Can I quit? And she said, yep. And I promptly did so. I left school, and I spoke to Mum some years later and said, why did you let me do that? Like, it was only 6 months or so to finish VCE, and she said, Simon, I was concerned you were going to have a nervous breakdown. Like, just couldn't cope with the pressure from school.
So much going on.
Yeah, and in a household that just was volatile, couldn't think straight, and I got so angry with this guy. I remember I was less worried about me. Incidentally, the yelling slowed down when I got bigger than him. I'm 6'3", so you talk 15, 16, 17. Yeah. They're the growth spurt years, right?
Oh, okay.
So things wound back then. I didn't really click till I was an adult. Went, timing. Right, makes sense. Okay. But I was less worried about me and more worried about my mum. She was stuttering, couldn't get a sentence out straight. She was feeling the pressure of the really challenging household and ended up asking him to leave for her own sanity, for the sanity of her kids. And that was hard for her.
Oh, yeah. She's been through so much.
But she had to protect her family. So she made that call. And so you get to Simon, who's now 17, 18,
Yeah, I was going to ask you, you said you were a Christian
Yeah.
at that point. Mm-hmm. How are you feeling toward God with all these things happening?
Again, you can remember a lot and see a lot with the benefit of hindsight. Mm-hmm. But at the time, I had these kind of two lives rolling. On the surface, I loved Jesus. I went to church. I went on another trip went on a missions trip to India when I was 16. Mm-hmm. So I was actively involved in the local church, but underlying, I had this kind of bitterness and anger that would flare up at times in different ways.
Because it was never resolved.
No,
your issues.
Well, Mum did the best she could.
Yeah.
But when you've got something, you don't have time to resolve it when there's another thing that lands.
Yeah.
And it just, as you said before, it builds up layers and layers and layers. You end up just carrying these things, and you don't know any different.
Yeah.
It just is what it is. Mm-hmm. So when I was 17, met this young lady, Jill, who's now my wife.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And I just went, you know what? I don't think I can bring myself to keep going to church. I had Jill in my world. We were doing everything that a married couple would do, just not living together. Mm-hmm. And between knowing I was doing the wrong thing, but also this idea of the two experiences of father I'd had weren't good. Yeah. Yet God is a father, and to
so
reconcile,
that kind of tainted your view of God.
Yeah, and my stepfather was a Christian man, and if that was a Christian man, I don't want to be like that.
Yeah.
So I was, they're the reasonings I had in my own mind, the excuses that I came up with, whatever it might be. But we walked away from church in my late teens. It was just too hard. There was other things to do. I was working, there was just too hard.
Now, speaking of working, you wanted to be a successful businessman like your dad.
Yeah.
How did that go?
Yeah, so good question. That was my motivation was Dad was a successful businessman. Mm-hmm. That's what I was going to be, and I went after it. Mm-hmm. So I left school. I was working just part-time at McEwen's, which became Bunnings, and I think I was 19 or 20, and I was asking all the sales reps, how do you become a sales rep? Because they had company cars and they just drove around drinking coffee, and I thought I could do that. So
very mature reasons for this.
Absolutely. I'm 19, 20. Like, come on, the company car is awesome.
Yeah.
So I was told by one of them, go and study marketing and get a job in internal sales. So that's what I went and did. Mm-hmm. I started studying marketing. I got a job in internal sales at a power tool company, gave myself a goal of 2 years to become a sales rep. I think I was 5 days short of 2 years when I got my first rep's job with another company called Ryobi. So was there for a number of years, then got poached by a company called Metabo. Their head office was in Victoria, so there was opportunity for career advancement there. 9 months there, sent to Adelaide to take on a state manager role in my...
so it's all happening for you.
Yeah. At this point, I'm 26, so there's multiple... Again,
yeah, okay.
This is
but you're moving up the corporate ladder.
Yeah. So by the time I was 28, I think, I was National Key Accounts Manager for that company at the same time as being the state manager for Vic Tas, which was our biggest region, at the same time as still being the state manager for SANT. So...
SANT?
South Australia, Northern Territory.
Okay, yeah.
So I had staff in... a staff member in South Australia who managed Northern Territory as well, and I had, I think, 4 reps in Victoria that were reporting to me.
And that brought you outstanding fulfillment in life.
Yeah, sure. Look, I did the corporate ladder thing, and that's, and it actually did the opposite. It didn't give me any fulfillment.
That's kind of what I was alluding to, yeah.
I know.
I've heard your story.
You have heard my story, and I got to the point where I remember getting to the end of the financial year, and I remember going, I've worked really, really, really hard, earned this company millions of dollars, and tomorrow we go back to $0.
Yeah.
And I've got to do it all again. For what? To sell power tools to people who may or may not need them. To make
That's
money.
got to be very deflating.
It was.
Yeah.
Now, don't get me wrong. There's real value in having a successful career, but for me personally, it didn't hit the hot button that I was looking for.
Yeah.
I guess it didn't fulfill what I was expecting it to fulfill.
Yeah.
And I remember just, at this point we were Christians again. I'll probably have to loop back to that part of the story. And I remember just saying to God, I'm done. What do you want me to do?
So what happened? How did you get back to going to church and having a relationship with the Lord?
So roll back a few years now. Jill and I got married when I was 20. Jill was 18. Couldn't bring myself to living with my girlfriend because it would upset my mum. Although I wouldn't have professed being a Christian. I knew one day I'd come back, but later, when I'm old and boring.
That was your thinking?
That was my thinking, yeah. When I'd had all the fun that I wanted to have. And this friend from grade 2.
Okay. Going back to the guy that helped you when you were being bullied?
This friend from grade 2 who I spent a lot of time with him and his family. His dad particularly was influential in a positive way for me. Still catch up with him today.
Oh, great.
And he
so the Lord brought another father figure in your life.
Yeah.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah. In fact, my kids still call him Papa Rodney.
Is that right?
Yeah. That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Just visited him recently. They live in Tassie. Went and visited him down there in the last few months. So this friend wrote me a letter. Now, he was studying with YWAM, Youth with a Mission, and he just really felt prompted by God to give me this Bible verse. And the letter said something along the lines of, "Hey, Simon, felt like God wanted me to give you this Bible verse. I want to encourage you. God's probably trying to speak to you about something." Now, I can't remember the verse, but what I do remember is going, I need to go back to church. And at the same time, Jill had also grown up in a Christian family who has her own story of challenge and trauma. She was flicking through the Bible one night when she couldn't sleep and said, "All right, God, you want to speak? You speak." And she just plonked the Bible open, and the passage that jumped out to her was a story of the prodigal son. You know, this idea where a wayward son was invited back into the family by his father. So that was her acknowledging that it was time to go back to church. And then it took a few months. So we would go week to week, and one week I'd say, "Hey, let's go to church," and she'd go, "Nah." And then the next week she'd go, "Hey, maybe we should go to church," and I'd go, "Nah." And eventually we both said yes, and started our way getting back into church life, church community. And I'm thankful for the church that I landed at. You know, one of the priorities of that church was facilitating programs that then went global around restoration of individuals. You know, it was called Careforce Life Keys. I think the Life Keys programs are still out there somewhere.
Alan Meyer, of course, from Careforce.
Exactly. Yep. So he was a pastor I grew up under since 1982 or something like that. The Careforce Life Keys programs were significant for me. I got to learn about who I am and the purpose of, like, there's a program called Search for Life, and it really helped me understand who I am and why I was created for a plan and a purpose. You know, I got to learn about family of origin. I did a course called Man to Man where I learned about
I've done that as well.
Which
leads to our next topic of forgiveness.
Yeah.
So one of the parts of that course is talking about forgiveness.
Yeah.
Now, you had all kinds of reasons, as we've talked about, to not be forgiving.
Yep.
To hold grudges.
Yep.
But that helped you, that program?
It did. I think some of the things I learnt was the fruit of unforgiveness affects me, not them. The idea that a lot of us have is, if I forgive someone, I let them off the hook.
That's your thinking.
Yeah.
And it's very common.
Yeah. Or if I forgive someone, it means what they did wasn't bad. Or like, there's all these ideas that we have that for us to hold unforgiveness against someone makes us feel like they're in trouble still. Like they've done the wrong thing and they should know they've done the wrong thing. And they've got to live with this guilt and shame for the rest of their life because they've done the wrong thing. We think we're instilling that on someone else when we don't forgive them. What I learnt was quite the opposite. It's actually something that captures me, holds me captive. It stops me from living my best life. It stops me from being fulfilled, and it actually taints every part of my life and affects every part of my life, my relationship with my wife, my family, my kids. All of that is affected by my unforgiveness.
And of course, you've heard this analogy many times before. Unforgiveness is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die.
Completely true. Completely true.
If you drink poison, they ain't going to die.
Yeah.
You're going to die.
Yep.
And so you realize it was hurting you more.
Yeah. So I had to work through what forgiveness was and what it wasn't.
Yeah.
You know, forgiveness wasn't letting them off the hook. It wasn't saying what they did was right. Forgiveness was actually releasing me from an unhealthy bond with that person that doesn't serve me and they might not even know exists.
Our guest today is once again Simon Warrick, who's sharing about the painful experiences in his childhood. But he's also giving us insights into how he learned to forgive. We'll hear more insights and more of Simon's story when we return right here on Real Faith.
The Word for Today is Australia's most widely read daily devotional, designed to give you practical teaching to keep you focused on your relationship with Jesus. Read it online or subscribe to the free printed edition at thewordfortoday.com.au.
You're listening to Real Faith, conversations with real people about how God works in their lives. If you want to know more about integrating faith into your life, our website is realfaith.org.au. Just go to the website and you'll find helpful articles about the impact faith can have on your life. Once again, that's realfaith.org.au.
Welcome back. I'm Eric Scatabo, and today, once again, I'm chatting with Simon Warrick, who's sharing his life journey with us. Before the break, we heard how he learned to forgive after so many bad things had happened to him in his childhood. Now, it would have been easy for him to hold on to a grudge and become a bitter person who God wouldn't be able to use to help others. Fortunately, that has not been the case, as we'll hear as Simon continues to share his story.
So the other piece that I learned was forgiveness is actually not a feeling. It's an act of obedience or a choice. You don't have to feel like you can forgive someone to choose to forgive them. And that's what I had to do. And there was multiple times I had to keep saying, God, I'm feeling hurt. Help me forgive them. You know, I need your strength to help me forgive this person for what they've done. The interesting thing when I was able to do that was I was actually able to start asking questions of their lives.
Which we were kind of chatting about earlier.
Yeah. So my dad, when I was able to release him and forgive him, I was able to start asking Mum, so what was his story? You know, what caused him to be the way that he was? You know, and you hear about, as I said before, his broken family, the loss of his mother when he was young, the pressure from his angry father. Doesn't mean that what he did was okay or right, but it gave me context for it. You know, my stepfather.
You understand.
Yeah.
But it doesn't excuse.
Yeah.
But it helps you understand.
Yeah, and when you understand, you go, okay, he didn't have the tools to work these things through.
He didn't go to a man-to-man course.
It wasn't a thing.
Right.
You know, back in the day, men were just told to suck it up, stiff upper lip, and just get on with life. And you push this stuff down. So it comes out in anger, or it comes out in whatever way. You know, unresolved issues or hurt comes out somehow. You know, it's like garlic. You know, you eat a whole lot of garlic and it starts coming out your pores the next day. You can't stop it.
I never heard that analogy.
I just made it up. I haven't heard it either. But it's true. Like, you know, you stink like garlic for a week, man, if you eat a whole lot of garlic, and you can't control that. You know, I'm going to have to save that analogy. That's a good one.
Oh, very good.
So unless you know how to deal with these things and find healing from them, it affects everything else in your life. I found out that my stepfather had some pretty traumatic childhood issues. And you start to go, okay.
But what's the saying? Hurt people hurt.
Hurt people hurt people. Yeah, totally. So it didn't make what they did was right, but as I started to forgive them, I started to understand more about their history, which made it easier to forgive them next time I felt frustrated with them. So it was like Shrek and the onion layers. Every layer you peel off, okay, there's more. Deal with that, peel the next layer off. The big thing for me is I didn't want my kids to experience my pain in their lives. If I didn't deal with my stuff, then they would be the recipients of a dad who hadn't dealt with his stuff in the same way I was a recipient of a dad who hadn't dealt with his stuff.
And that would manifest itself in anger or different...
Who knows?
Yeah.
Who knows?
But whatever it would be, it wouldn't be healthy.
Correct. Correct. So it's funny, we haven't talked about my kids yet, but we've got 3 amazing adult children, and Jill and I have actually said to them, if you need to go to a psychologist, go. If you need to throw us under the bus, throw us under the bus. There was stuff that we've done in your childhood that we would do differently now because of how we've learnt and grown since. But if you need to deal with it, deal with it. You know, if you need to tell us something wrong, we'll apologise quickly. Like it's we want them to not have to deal with a history that we had to deal with. In the same way, we don't want their kids to have to deal with the history that they've dealt with, and hopefully it gets
break the cycle.
Yeah, it gets thinner and thinner, or smaller and smaller each generation. So we've been really open with them and said, look, there was areas in your life that we've done the wrong thing. We've apologised as we've needed to, but we've just said, you know, you have full permission to say what you need to say, even if you feel like you're letting us down by sharing honestly with your experience, do what you got to do. Find healing.
Now, unfortunately, we're running out of time, but
cool.
The good news is you did forgive.
Yeah.
You didn't hold on to that bitterness. And you were called into ministry, and you have exciting things happening more recently.
Yeah.
So can you kind of skim over 25 years in a couple of minutes?
Absolutely. So I mentioned getting frustrated in my work environment. I prayed about it. We were in church. We had a couple moving overseas to go on mission, and I remember just saying, God, I want to do what you want me to do. I'm done. I just want to do what you want me to do. And clear as a bell in my mind, I heard him say, go to Bible college. I argued with him for a while. I reminded him of my career. I reminded him of my mortgage. I reminded him of my wife and 3 kids that I was responsible for, and he just kept saying, who am I? Do you think I can take care of that? So in my argument, in the end, I said, if this is really you, you got to tell Jill, because I don't want to get a few months down the track, we're having to sell our house because we can't afford to keep it, and she looks at me and says, you did this to us. So driving out of church that day, I looked at Jill and I said, I think God wants me to go to Bible college next year. And she just started smirking at me. I'm like, why are you smiling? And she said, I've known for about 3 months now. I've just been waiting for you to work it out. So it was a pretty easy
wise,
decision.
wonderful.
Yeah. Pretty easy decision to quit my job. My boss tried to talk me out of it for 2.5 hours, which was very generous of him. But the decision was made. Bible college full-time for 2 years, was on staff at what was Careforce Church for about 7 years as done multiple roles at that church. And then moved up to regional Victoria to take on our own church, led our large church.
First time being a pastor?
First time being a senior pastor, up in regional Victoria. Did that for 5 years. Moved back to Melbourne because our tenure had come to an end and we just knew it was right for the family. Took on a role as a CEO for a not-for-profit that does amazing work offshore. I oversaw Australia, and this organisation, the Australian entity, was about supporting the work in the field. Did that for just under 5 years.
Which meant many overseas trips.
Yeah, it was awesome.
Yeah.
I love travel.
Yeah.
So I got to go to the field and take people multiple times. And one of my favourite things to do was to take pastors to there and let them see what God was doing and then challenge them about how can they apply what they've learnt back home. So that was really special.
Yeah.
Finished up there, a couple of years ago now, probably 18 months ago now. And in the last 12 months, I've been working with a small church, helping them make strategic decisions about their future.
So you're an interim pastor?
Interim pastor, yeah. And that was a beautiful experience.
Which means you knew it was coming to an end.
Yeah. And around 8-9 months into that process, really felt like we needed to put a line in the sand and did that. And they're at a place now where I've handed over just recently to...
They're in a better place.
Absolutely.
Metaphorically, I guess you could say.
Yeah, correct. So they've been handed over to another person to take on the lead of that church while they consider being adopted by a large, healthy church in the next 12 months or so.
Okay.
So they've gone from a church that was self-declared as dying to one now that is actually got a real set of excitement about life and future for them.
Great.
So,
but wait, there is more.
There is more.
And this ties back into your childhood and all your experiences.
And this is the cool thing with God, right?
Yeah.
God doesn't waste anything. And if I look back through my history, if I look back through all the roles that I've done and my personal life experience, the role that I'm stepping into couldn't be more perfect. So this is a CEO role of a not-for-profit. It's called Kids Hope. And what we do is we actually invite people to go into local schools and to mentor a vulnerable kid. One child, one mentor, an hour a week. And that's facilitated through a local church community. So there's layers of health and safety. There's safety for the children through that support network, and that structure creates a safety net for the children. But what it means is that kids who are vulnerable like me have someone they can talk to.
And how much of a difference that would have made in your life?
Well, I was speaking to Mum as I was applying for this role, and she said, I wish you had something like that when you were younger.
Yeah.
For me, in my high school years, I had a teacher who was my trombone teacher, and we'd go and sit in my trombone lesson and probably spend most of the time just letting me debrief on life. And having a mentor in my world, she was there to teach me trombone. But to have that moment of being able to have a safe person who I can just share what's happening in my world made all the difference. And that's what Kids Hope is all about. It's just stunning. And so here I am in a position where I got personal experience understanding what it's like to be a kid in that, where I've got the experience of leading a not-for-profit before, so I understand that piece. I've got experience leading a church, so I understand that piece. And we get to bring these three things together to see kids impacted for eternity.
Wow.
It's really, really special. And interestingly enough, just some quick stats for you, 95% of teachers who are engaged with the Kids Hope program, they say it's improved the emotional health and well-being of children. 95%.
Wow.
82% of mentors say that Kids Hope helps a child form positive social relationships. And I've heard stories of kids who went to a school who just weren't talking. And all of a sudden, after a season with a mentor, all of a sudden start engaging in class again. You know, the church that I was leading recently do have a Kids Hope program, and I spoke to the person who was running that in my final few weeks there. And I said, the school that you're serving in, how many people could you use to help with this? And her response was, the feedback she's had from the principal was as many as you can send. The need is so great and the value to the school is so significant. So here we are. God's so faithful, hey?
Yeah.
You know, I get to use all of my history and
come full circle in a sense.
Yeah, and use it to serve kids who are like me.
Well,
So
the saying is the Lord can turn your mess into a message and your test into a testimony. And, well, He's doing something with everything you've gone through, and it's pretty spectacular.
And you know what? I wouldn't change a bit of it.
Is that right? As hard as it was?
It's made me who I am. Had I have not gone through what I went through, how could I sit with someone who's going through a hard time and not say I understand your pain, but have empathy knowing I've experienced similar pain?
Yeah. I'd listen to you.
Thanks.
But I think I've listened to you enough.
We're going for hours, my friend. You and I can talk.
That's right. Thank you so much for sharing your story with us today.
That's a privilege, mate. Thanks so much for giving me the opportunity.
Well, that was part 2 of my conversation with Simon Warrick, who's now the CEO of Kids Hope Australia. Kids Hope is Australia's largest early intervention primary school-based mentoring program. Unfortunately, as we've heard in Simon's story, some kids have it tough, and ideally, every child needs to be supported and valued, like Simon was by his trombone teacher. Well, that's what Kids Hope is all about. They provide primary children with a mentor for an hour a week, and the impact can be immeasurable. As Jesus said, "Whoever welcomes one such child in my name welcomes me." To find out more about Kids Hope and how you can get involved, the website is kidshope.org.au. Once again, that's kidshope.org.au. Well, thank you so much for joining us for part 2 of Simon Warrick's inspiring story. It was great to hear how the Lord is using him now after all the things he went through as a child. Until next time, I'm Eric Scatterbo. So long, and God bless.
You've been listening to Real Faith, and if you have any questions or comments, you can send us a message through our website, realfaith.org.au. That's realfaith.org.au.
Real Faith is a production of Vision Christian Media.
This program is a production of Vision Christian Media. To find out more about us, see vision.org.au.